Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Full-Time Investor. I'm Mandy Brenham, known as the Joint Venture Queen. We own solutions-driven property management. We have an arm of our company that does asset acquisition. We have an arm of our company that does construction. Please feel free to follow me on Facebook, Instagram, known as the Joint Venture Queen. Always sharing content, always sharing videos, always sharing what's going on in my life so that you too can be an active investor the same way that I am. And I'm glad that you're here with us today because it is so going to be worth your time. It is an area of investing that I highly support, but yet with a tweak on it of a unique opportunity of which I've not done myself. So I have here today with me Jas Takhar. Thank you so much, Jas, for being here on the show with us today. I'm honored to have you as a guest on my show. That is pretty cool. So thank you.
Thank you so much for having me, Mandy. I truly, truly appreciate it. And I love the messaging that you're putting out there, the content that you're putting out there. Your community is obviously getting bigger and bigger by the minute. And so congratulations to everyone in your community as well to get onto this live broadcast and all your past shows because, you know, I truly believe in education in any format. It could be in video, audio, or written. And so I really, really commend you and your team for putting in the effort, because I know how much it takes to do this on a regular basis. So congratulations to you as well. And thanks again for having me.
That's a little shout out to our producer. Again, one day we're going to have the Pokeroo Larry come out here. And in the meantime, he loves doing what he's doing back there. So, Jas, you are an award-winning real estate agent. You have a team of 32 agents within it. So you are the accumulation of all of those that are around you. And I know that what makes you great. And you've won some awards with Royal LePage. But the key thing here to realize about you is you're in the Toronto market. And if anybody talks about real estate in Canada, they always go, oh, Toronto and Vancouver. And you are the hub of the Toronto market. So
yes,
for buy and hold, what does that look like in the Toronto landscape these days?
Well, look, I definitely believe in the buy and hold strategy, especially in areas like Toronto and Vancouver, because there's a lot of track history. So if we look back at the last 39 years in the Toronto real estate market, we've seen a passive appreciation year over year on average of 6.9%. That's on average. So that also means that we've seen the market perform at rates like 10% and 12%, both in the condo market, semi-detached townhomes, and detached market. What I see a lot of investors do is wanting that quick buck. And I think I coined it, I'm not sure, but I say it a lot. You cannot day trade real estate. This is not like a stock. It's not something that you're going to look at daily. The real way to create wealth, and you and I and a lot of people in your community know that creating wealth in real estate is done by long term. It's not the get rich quick scheme.
Nope.
You really, really need to look at it from a long-term perspective. And then when you're looking at a buy and hold, you want to look at, okay, so there's the passive appreciation that we all know of.
Yeah,
but where is the
goes up? Yeah.
Right, the market goes up year over year, and is that based on fundamentals and things that are going to be happening for a long time? So areas like Alberta, for example, where it comes down to the oil industry, we're here in Toronto, we really don't manufacture anything. It's all service-based.
Right.
Now, last few years, we've outpaced San Francisco, Chicago, and LA combined for new jobs in the tech sector. So we know that there's a lot of people coming into the greater Toronto area. In fact, there's 150,000 people coming into the greater Toronto area year over year from outside of Canada. So in the next 10 years, now also counting the interprovincial immigration, we're looking at close to 1.7 to 1.8 million people. And we need approximately 50,000 households year over year. On our best year ever, we did 38,000. This year in 2019, we're going to end up with 23,000 condo units. Like, this is not a housing shortage. This is a housing crisis.
Yeah, you need 50,000 and you only created 23,000 this year. That's a heck of a lot of families that don't have places to go.
Exactly. And now, as an investor, that's the delta. That's what we need to look at and take advantage of, possibly. And one of the strategies that myself and my team, and thanks for the shout out about my team, we do have 32 realtors that span right across the Greater Toronto Area, essentially from Burlington right out to Oshawa, Newmarket to the lake. And so, for your out of province and out of country viewers and listeners, that's approximately a 75-kilometer radius. For your US guys, about 50-mile radius that we cover. And we've very, very blessed we help a little over 700 buyers, sellers, and investors every single year, out of which about 400 are for investors. And so we know we have a lot of data. I don't say that to impress anyone.
No.
It's really to impress upon everyone watching and listening right now that we have a lot of data. So we've seen where investors made mistakes. We've also seen where investors have made a lot of money over a longer period of time, not that 1-2 year, 2-year type of investment.
Okay. So then an investor comes to you guys, they're saying, hey, I'm seeing all this market data, and condos are a very popular thing within the city right now. They're economical for people to get into, good price points. But what are some of the ways that you help investors filter a condo as an investor, not as a flipper per se?
Yes, great question. In terms of condos, one of the biggest reasons why they've now become the new first home buyer purchase, as well as the place that tenants want to look into rent, is because we no longer can build subdivisions this way. Like homes, we can only go up. Yeah. Because of the Greenbelt legislation, we're kind of on a real estate island. Can't build south of the city. We have the lake, and then we have the Greenbelt that runs right across southern Ontario that doesn't allow builders to build. And so a question that I'm sure you hear a lot, we hear it probably 8 to 10 times a day, is, oh my God, who's buying all these condos? We were on our way to your office, Jas, and we saw all these cranes on the Gardner, which is the main artery that leads into our downtown core, or down the DVP, the Don Valley Parkway. See, that's really not the right question to ask, because if there's a crane in the sky, then that builder has already sold 80% of the building. Otherwise, he or she would not have got the financing from their lender. So the question is never who's bought them. It's who's going to buy them. Sorry, it's always who's already bought these.
Right
now, with the pre-construction pre-construction strategy, it's not just any pre-construction that comes up on the market. I have to say, because of our podcast, because of the amount of deals that we do, the investor groups that we're part of, communities like yourself, Manny, that a lot of developers come to us and want us to promote their projects. So I probably get about 65 to 70 on my desk in this office. Year over year, I've been getting them for about 80 for the last 7 to 8 years. So about 65 to 70 projects. We'll only promote 8 to 10 of them. And here's the reason why. First and foremost, you can't pick up the building. We all heard of it. Location, location, location. Where is this building going to be built? And is it in an area that tenants, because as from an investor's perspective, I know majority of our community and our listeners and viewers today are investors. We want to, who's going to rent it out from us? And so you might find a cheaper price outside of the Toronto area, but there's a reason it's selling for less, because it's also not going to bring in the rental income. So first and foremost, I personally only in the last 4 years invested in pre-construction condos, and I'll tell you why in a second. But it's because I like to stay in the Toronto area by transit, or where I know, like right in the downtown core. Now, downtown core used to be the financial district. It's now stretched out right to like DVP to Dufferin, the lake upwards to even like all the way over to like St. Clair, probably closer to Bloor, really. So it's stretched out. So I like to stay in the downtown core or on transit lines, because I know for the next 15, I'm banking on, and I don't need a crystal ball for this, and it's not really speculating. It's just history has told me that when you buy along the transit line, or an area where there's a lot of jobs, and in Toronto it's service-based, the schools, hospitals, and lounges and restaurants, the values, and this is not just in Toronto, when you buy along transit lines, this is right across the world, the values will always go this way. okay, over a longer period of time, and it's more rentable because tenants, a lot less people are driving nowadays. They're not getting licenses because the maintenance on a car payment, insurance, gas, parking, it's $1,000, 900 to $1,000 a month. A lot of people want to be able to walk to work. So location is the number one first thing that I'm looking at. Number two is builder, because we want to make sure that the reputation for the builder is ultra positive, okay? And we're not the guinea pig for their first project. Let somebody else be the guinea pig on their first couple of projects. We want to make sure that they've finished and completed projects, and then we can actually go on to the resale market and take a look at their fits and finishes. We're going to look at the Terry on Home Warranty website. How many complaints have they had? Or look, I mean, things go wrong in a unit, like where the cabinets and the flooring got scratched. Those are minor things, but is there some major deficiencies that they're not even willing to fix? Because if they did it in a couple of projects, they'll probably do it. That's just their reputation. So we want to make sure that we invest in a building that the builder's reputation is ultra high. Then we want to look at what incentives are in place for an investor. So we want to make sure that we have a free assignment. This is where I've seen in the last 5 years, investors make double their deposit. So if they put a deposit down of 80,000 stretched over 2 years, I've seen when they're able to do an assignment, actually get back their 80,000 and make another 80,000 in profit. So there's a lot of money being made in assignments. Assignments, for anybody watching or listening who's never heard the term, it just gives you the ability to flip the contract, because life can happen as well. You're buying a project at today's value for something that's going to be built 3 years from now. A lot can happen in 3 years, and so you need to have the ability to sell it before it gets built. So that has to be written into the contract. We also want to look at and make sure that we have the ability to rent it out during occupancy. So in pre-construction, there's 2 stages to a closing. There's occupancy, when the builder says, "Okay, Mandy, you're it's past all safety regulations. You can take occupancy of the unit, but it's not registered yet with the city as a corporation, so you don't have to get a mortgage." But if the builder doesn't allow us to rent it out, generally speaking, within that occupancy period lasts about 4 to 6 months, then as an investor, you're going to be out of pocket. And so we need to make sure we have the clause in that allows us to rent out during occupancy, and any contract that we, any investment opportunity from a pre-construction perspective that we deal with, will always make sure that's in place. And then we want to double check and triple check, dot all the I's and cross all the T's with a lawyer within the 10-day cooling period. So in Ontario, you automatically, when you buy a pre-construction condo, you automatically get a 10-day cooling period. Just for that reason, you get to breathe. You get to make sure that this is going to be the right project for you. And so in an essence, the benefits of pre-construction investing, and why to kind of bring it back full circle in the last few years, is why I've only invested in pre-construction, is because I'm buying something for today's value that's going to be built out in 3 years. So I'm going to get the built-in equity already. B, my down payment as an investor of 20% is paid out in installments over, generally speaking, a 2.5-year period. So let me repeat that. So I'm, as an investor, going to buy something for today's value that's going to be built in 3 years. I know, on an average, conservatively in Toronto, we've been seeing 5% year over year, okay, for the last few years. That's ultra conservative. I mean, the last couple of years have been closer to 8.1. But as an investor, let's be really ultra conservative with our numbers, right? So 5%, buying today's value for something that's going to be built in 2-3 years. My down payment of 20%, I don't have to put it all down at once. I can put it out. It's 30 days, 5%, 6 months, 5%, 90 days to 6 months, 5%. A year, from a year from now, I put 5%. And then the last 5% to total to 20 is paid like an occupancy 2-3 years from now, which gives me the ability to call Mandy and say, Mandy, is there a JV that I can maybe look at with you for a couple of years, or a mortgage investment? There's tons of companies that very reputable lenders that you can do like a private mortgage. You want to time it Well, obviously, where you're going to get paid your principal and interest back in a year for like a mortgage investment.
Yeah.
You take that interest back and put it down towards the condo.
Yeah.
Okay. And I don't actually have to get a mortgage. I have to qualify. There's a formality from a pre-approval perspective, but I actually don't have to tie up the ability to finance it because there's no mortgage to get. It's not built for 3 years. So I'm buying something without even getting a mortgage yet.
So out of curiosity, because I've not run my numbers on a condo, can't say that. What kind of rental rates are you getting? Are we covering the costs of are we close?
You gave me an amazing layup using a basketball term because that's my favorite part. There's no money out of your pocket. Majority, like I'm talking like 90% of the time. And that's why it's a great segue into buy and hold in a second. But with all rentals with all condos that we look at in downtown Toronto, it's another reason why we get 70 projects and opportunities at my desk every year, but we only promote 8 to 10 because I know what they're selling for when you work in the mortgage payment, maintenance fee, property tax, and a $25 to $30 insurance payment. You're not going to get that covered. Yeah. In some outskirt areas where I know in Toronto along the transit line, remember along transit lines is where we're going to get the highest amount of rent, that your expenses are going to be covered by your rental income. So you're not out of pocket as well. Now we obviously want to look at the other ways that we're winning with an investment property where your mortgage is being paid down, and that's always nice. And then you get the passive appreciation as well.
Yes, because it's brand new, so there typically will be very low maintenance, or it's within things will be covered within the condo corp, so there shouldn't be very much maintenance at all over the first few years of ownership.
And just as an added on incentive for anybody that's watching or listening, any investment property that you do with my company, we offer a 2-year tenant placement and 2-year property management at no cost because we truly believe in a turnkey transaction. I also want to show and get out in the marketplace to let you know that we don't have commission breath. We're not doing this for a deal. It's really, we're here for the long term, and we're going to rent it out for you, bring in, and if our first rental is only for a year, we're still on the hook to get you that second lease agreement in place from a tenant, and then we're also going to manage it. Now, what we really, really hope is that we're teaching you along the way because it's not that tough. Like, Mandy, how many times do you hear, right? Like tenant horror stories? Not many in the big scheme of things, and most of the time it was the landlord's fault anyways because he or she didn't do the checking.
We had one eviction, 140 units. Over,
wow,
right? 2007 we started, and honestly, it was a good tenant that just got into the wrong stuff. So he'd been with us for 5 years before he kind of changed who he was, and that was the only guy we've ever had to get out. So I get the horror stories, but most of the time it's on the investor side. They think they can manage the property. They think they can be a full-time, whoever they are, occupation, 40 hours a week, and do this on the side. Well, a condo is a great thing for you to own because it's only typically one tenant. There's a lot of stuff. You don't have to worry about phone calls about, the same kind of things that I have, roofs and furnaces and stuff. You guys have that all covered.
Yeah, and look, we're talking about, and this might sound like a shoebox to some, 500 square feet to 600 square feet. The average in Toronto is probably about 450 to 500 of what's being built now. Yeah. It's really the Manhattanization effect in Toronto, right? Yeah. It's you can't go much bigger anymore, and you don't need to, because here's the nice thing with the smaller unit as well. 450, 500 square feet, the tenants don't generally stay there that long, because how long can you really stay in a small unit, right? Exactly. Happened to me. My wife and I stayed 2010, bought a 640 square foot unit, 1 bedroom, had our first son. It's actually his birthday today. He turned 6. So we were there in 2010 for a couple of years, had him. His crib was right in our room for about 8 months. And my wife said, that's enough. We need something bigger right now. And I said, I know, I get it. And so I started to rent that out in 2015. Right. And check this, and this is is kind of bringing it full circle to buy and hold for you, Mandy, that I was $100 negative at that time. Okay. Now, not the best investment because I am putting out money out of my pocket. Caveat. If you and I go to a bar today with Larry and us three have a couple of drinks and some wings and some nachos, I have a feeling it's going to be closer to $200 with taxes and tip. But we don't complain about that. No. We do complain about the $100 a month, but that's just kind of me on my soapbox.
Yeah.
Now, I was paying $100 a month negative for 2 months. Sorry, I apologize, 2 years. So we're looking at $2,400 at the end of that 2 years. Okay. But a nice thing was happening in the back end. My values were going up. The mortgage was being paid down. I went back and refinanced it, and starting in year 3, I still own the condo, 15 Stafford, right at King and Strawn, and I pulled out $75,000, tax free.
So you weren't the magic $2,400 when you had a check for 75 grand in your hand.
So I made 72 and change now, and I'm okay with that. Like, I'm ecstatic about the 72 and change that I made, but I was able to float the $100 a month because I know spending habits that I spend sometimes on dumb stuff. I don't need a $5 coffee. I could buy a $2 coffee. And so we our daily spending habits is something that I think everyone should track. Everything. There's hidden money somewhere. Just track everything. For somebody who's listening and thinking about investing or just wanting to get in to the conversation, start there. Track everything. You'll find some money for sure. Now, because I use the buy and hold strategy, I'll be refinancing. So I did the refinance in 2017-ish, late 2016, pulled out the 75 grand, and now I'm about to refinance it for a second time.
Yep.
And I'll probably pull out another 75 minimum thousand. Now somebody's listening saying, well, Jas, the rents, how are you going to be able to cover that 75,000 that goes on the mortgage?
Go, because I want to hear what you have to say, because I already know what I say to somebody. Go.
Well, the rents have gone up. That's all I know, right? The rents have gone up. The mortgage rates have stayed very, very low. Like they're still historically low. But I'm curious what you usually tell people.
So to me, it's easy. So if it were to be a $2,400 loss, $100 a month, you know what I'd say to somebody? You got a check in your hand, another 75 grand. I want you to leave $10,000 as a reserve fund in the bank account. And they're like,
love that.
Do that. I said, well, because now it's not actually going to negatively cash flow because you created the negative cash flow because you refinanced it. So there's two options. You could refinance it and leave 50 grand in, which reduces your mortgage payment the same $100, or you can be in control, because I always like to be in control of my investments. I'll take out that money, create a reserve fund over here, hence why the book that I'm going to write, and the more I keep saying it, I'm going to actually have to do it, is going to be called Cash Flow the Illusion, because I think you cash flow. And this is just one of those ways.
Now, like if you're bleeding, and I use that term for a lack of a better term, $500 a month, you don't need to be $500 a month negative, because there's investments that you can actually just break even and maybe $100 a month negative. But there's a lot of opportunities that you can look at where you're $100 negative and break even. I love the title of the working title, we'll call it, of your book right now, because a lot of I run across a lot of investors and say, but Jas, I can invest in Windsor for $700 a month positive cash flow. And I say, great. Like, I'm not here to tell you where to put your money. It's not my money. The only thing I want you to look at, Mr. and Mrs. Investor, is that you're not going to get the passive appreciation and the security of knowing that you're investing into an area like Toronto. Am I biased? Obviously, I'm born and raised in Toronto. I do all my business in Toronto. But guys, I'm looking at like actual facts of how the Toronto market and the greater Toronto area has performed, and not a small sample size, right? Sometimes I hear, Windsor's an area like, and this is not a shot at Windsor. I love Windsor. I have lots of friends and family in Windsor. It's just, I'm talking facts, right? They'll say, well, in the last 2 years, it's increased X. I know, but it's such a small sample size. Like, let's go back even further, right? And so the buy and hold for me, it really acts like an ATM, right? Because I can keep on going back and refinancing it. There's some work. Let's not try to paint a rosy picture, especially for somebody who's listening for the first time. There's some work involved. You might need to go paint the unit every time a tenant leaves. You might need to drop off a $20 bottle of wine because your tenant is not your tenant. He or she is your customer, and they're giving you at least $20,000 a year by the how much of the principal is being paid down and how much you're getting in passive appreciation. If I know, Mandy, if I was giving you 20 grand every single year, you would be nice to me. I know you're nice anyways, but I'm saying, like, you would make sure, like, hey, maybe a thank you card, maybe a bottle of wine. I think landlords, some, and I'm not painting everyone with the same same brush here, because I know a lot of very successful landlords, but this thought that you're up here and the tenant's below here, that mindset's just not going to work, because when you can go and refinance and pull out $75,000, $100,000, it's really $100 every few years, call it 3.5, 4 years. Look, that's net money. You would have to work. You need to work to make an income of $200,000 at a 50% tax bracket, because it's tax free. The government's not going to. But there's no capital gains. They're not going to tax you on anything because you're not selling anything.
Yeah.
And so as you know, a lot of the content I push, even as a realtor, so out of my 32 realtors, 12 of us focus primarily on investment real estate. The other group is helping people buy their first condo, their home, a move up. But when we get calls, I tell people, like, why are you selling? Unless you have to. But let's just look at an option. Let's get a financing person involved. This is not about selling and buying and realtors making commission. If there's a way we can keep the property rented out, keep the expenses lower than what we're going to get in rent, and refinance, and you can still get your another principal residence, another property, why not? Why are you losing the asset?
Yeah.
We're not building any more land, guys.
I had 2 calls with investors that wanted to sell their property. They heard that I buy properties, and at the end of the call, Larry's like, why did you do that? I totally talked them out of selling. So, I mean, it would have been a deal for me, but that's not the point. So I coached them into ways that they could keep it, got them connected to same thing, to a mortgage. I think that, you know what, again, we're back to this education part, because it's a lack of knowledge that people wouldn't even know about what their options are, how they can make it work, what are some different ways. So it really is important to be connected to the right circle of people, have the right agents on your team, the right mortgage specialists, the people that think like you think. So do you suggest to people what's your idea of a diversified portfolio with condo guy?
Yes. Well, I think it's not just condos. So I would look at, to me, a pre-construction condo is by far the most passive and boring investment you can do. It's like watching paint dry. It's really, really boring. You're just writing checks until, the building gets built. So you might as well, that's one, if you have the capital, because you might as well take advantage of the skyline in Toronto, right? Because the values are going up. This is not stopping anytime soon. Going back to our talk about that not being a housing shortage, this being a crisis. Yeah. So a pre-construction, because you don't have to get financing, you don't actually have to get a mortgage right now, is something that you should always have kind of going, no more than 2 at the same time, because you got to remember, guys, we do need to get mortgages for these units when they actually get built. I then like to look at a single family home that you can have at least 2 doors in. For someone who's starting out as investing, to me, the holy grail is to get into multiplexes, because I just feel like under one roof, you can have 5, 7, 8, 12 units. We go up to 25 and we cap it for ourselves, because then us actually having inventory is not something that we specialize in. So I have a team that is actually the #1 team in Canada for apartment buildings, starting at like 50 to like 500 units. So we stop at around 25. And I also love multiplexes because financing is just looked at from a different perspective. When it comes to the lenders, it's not just you personally, it's based more on the rental income of the property. Yeah. So which allows you to scale it a little bit more.
Right.
I am in love with student rentals if it's done properly in a good location. If it's if you can actually put a reputable property management company, I do not suggest you, Mandy, you and I managing it. We're busy and we don't want to take two calls at 2 o'clock in the morning from two students who decided to get into a little rift with each other. That's just not what we want to do. We want investments. We don't want headaches. And so with student housing, it's because it's one of the most recession-proof investments around, like within real estate. It's one of the most recession-proof types of investments, because unless parents stop sending their kids to school, we're going to have that influx, right? And then it's a matter of looking at what school. So for me and my clients, they've done really well in the Kitchener-Waterloo area because of the two universities. You have obviously Laurier and University of Waterloo. Now, again, I cannot emphasize enough that you need to get a reputable property management company and pay them the 10%. It's going to be worth it. It's, again, however, it ties right back into buy and hold. So for me, it all comes back to buy and hold, because the average person that I've come across in the last 15 years that I've been doing this cannot handle a flip. They just cannot handle it. We have a mutual friend, Scott McGilvery. He makes it look really easy in a 30-minute episode, actually with commercials. So that's actually really only 22 minutes. I had him on my podcast not too long ago, and he said it himself. He's like, Jas, like, it takes months for us to do these properties. Like, we're all pros at it. For someone to think that they can come in and just because they're handy at something, the average person cannot handle it, because they also have a full-time gig. And so the carrying costs on a flip, picking up a home, adding an income suite, even something as simple as an income suite, is not as easy as it sounds, right?
Nope, permits and drawings. What about the financing for a flip? Most people are like, oh, I'm not going to go traditional financing. I'm going to go private. The fees are like, boom, way up there. You're sinking if you aren't on time and on schedule and on budget. Now, Scott, in one of the many times that I've seen him present, he said one of his biggest regrets was selling half of the assets that they did. I want to say it was around one of the GO train stops. He had okay, and he sold it. He said, "Do you want to know what that house?" We were excited to make $50,000 at the time, and he said, "I think it's gone up like $500,000." Now we're talking 10 or 15 years that he was able to, look back on these properties. I'm sitting here 3 years after having looked at a property going, I'm not sure. I think it's too much. Doy, Mandy.
It's so true. Look, I mean, what in the Greater Toronto area for the last 100 years, every decade values have doubled. Okay. However, in the last decade, they've went up 2.5 times to 3 times. So anybody living in the Greater Toronto area, just look at your principal residence. See what happened with the home that you own. It's the same thing everywhere. I think there's something, it comes from a mindset perspective. It's the impatience. I want the money now. We live in the instant gratification of social media and everything we do, right? Like you and I were texting each other a couple of days ago, just setting this up. Like back in the days, it took a little bit longer. Like we'd have to call each other and leave a voicemail and all that kind of stuff. I mean, voicemails are passe now, right? And so if you can just look at each investment in a 10-year window, you'll know, like, guys, how quick have the last 10 years gone in our lives? The next 10 years are going to go by even faster. And so if you can look at it in a 10-year window, you'll know how much the values will go up, and you'll probably be able to refinance and pull out equity twice in that period.
Yeah. They say we overestimate what we can do in a year, and we underestimate what we can do in 10. I remember when I joined our coaching group, our connection is, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't believe 5 years. I've got 5-year terms on these mortgages. Are they ever going to come up? What am I going to do in the meantime? And now I'm like, oh my God, like my properties are coming up for renewal. What am I going to do with that money when it comes up? Right? Recycling, an asset that you thought was just going to be okay. Next thing you know, the market changes and you're able to pull it out. Then you can work with that money as you wait for the other one. So it really does become very like a lot of pieces involved when you get some mortgages, some different properties at different financing terms.
Now, I don't want to make it sound like whatever property you buy, you're going to be perfectly fine. And I know that's not what you're saying either. There is some science to it, and it's looking at what's available in certain areas as well as what the homes or condos sell for. So you can very easily ask any realtor that you're connected with for them to give you a list of comparable condos and homes and see what they sold for, so you can actually determine real value.
Yeah.
Right. And then you'll see how much they've appreciated over time. But I've yet to see any other strategy. And I'm speaking from experience personally and with investors who have made millions, not hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars in real estate. And they all believe in buy and hold. It's long term. It's to add to your book title, for example, it's not about cash. Is it? I think the question people have to ask, do you want cash flow or do you want to create long-term wealth?
Yeah. Yeah. And some do want cash flow. They're looking to be able to say, I want to step out of my job, but it's, that's a whole other topic to be able to say, well, I make $100,000 a year at my job, so I need $100,000 of cash flow. And you're like, no, you don't actually. You need to start to compare apples to apples here. So it's a little bit of education or reprogramming people's brains to be able to say that what we've become accustomed to isn't what we need to have from our real estate holdings from various different perspectives.
Yeah, and going back to pre-construction, all I've seen in the last 4 years is someone purchasing a unit at, say, $450,000, $500,000. Let's use $500,000. And when the building got built 3 years later, that's now worth approximately $700,000. Simple. And I have thousands of examples that I can show you. And now I think we've done about 250 a year over year for the last 5 years. 95% of the people held on. It's that 5% that said exactly what Scott said. I wish I had kept it. Right. And so that's what we're trying. We're trying to remove that from the vocabulary and change it to I'm glad I did.
I'm glad I kept it. And you know what? We're both also going to be sitting here saying it's not always easy. There's uncomfortable times. My assistant will tell me that he's never seen me so stressed on the day before closing one of our first large multiplex. And I just had so much fun. There were so many moving pieces and I just paced in my living room. And when I look back now and you go, aren't you a genius? Because you pushed through those hard times, because you overcame what many people would have just went, that's it, I'm done, I'm out. It's a push through the interest rate changes, the market changes. No, everyone says, what if there's a recession? Who cares? It's we're creating a product that people are always going to need, and I don't need to sell. So unless I need to sell, which we can always create we don't need to sell. Keep the assets, hold on.
Yes, and let's look at what happens when a recession hits, right? Recession hits, interest rates go higher, and then the tenants who are thinking about buying cannot become buyers anymore because they're not going to be able to afford the cost of borrowing. So now you have more tenants in the marketplace looking at your property, which drives up the value. Yeah. So even in a recession, you're protected because you're going to have less. And then here's the thing, that's when you want to make sure that you have some money under the mattress, if people still do that, and actually go on a shopping spree because values have dropped a little bit. Yes. And so that's when we call the JV queen and say, let's do some joint ventures now and let's get more real estate, Mandy.
Yeah, exactly. I got enough. I got more cash than I can myself invest, and let's get moving. No matter what, you know what? I just love your passion for real estate. I love where your knowledge level is. You know what? You just bring people up to your level. I love it. So thank you so much, Jas, for what you do, for myself, for the community, for everybody out there in the real estate world.
Thank you so much. It really, really means a lot, Mandy. I love doing these. If there's anyone who wants to get in contact with me, really just start off at my podcast. You can search REC Experience on any podcast platform. I've done a little over 80 episodes. 80% of the content is real estate. I do sprinkle in some entrepreneurship content because for a couple of reasons. One, it's my passion. Two, I've seen a lot of similarities, and probably the biggest one is people needing to take that leap of faith and taking action. It's the same from a real estate investor to an entrepreneur starting his or her own business. It's always taking that leap of faith and removing some type of friction in their life, going from where they are to where they want to go. And other than that, you can check me up on Instagram, Jas Takhar number 13, 13. It's my lucky number, and somebody else took Jas Takhar from me. So it's Jas Takhar 13, and I would love to sit down for a coffee with any of your viewers or listeners and really just give them the value, see where they are, and if we can help, great. If not, hopefully we brought some type of value to the conversation.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jas, for being my guest today. Everybody, I look forward to seeing you next week on another episode of The Full-Time Investor. I'm Mandy Brenham, JV Queen, signing out for another week.